You know how some names, some place names, they just feel like they've always been part of the scenery?
Like they're baked in.
Exactly. You hear a name, maybe see it on a sign, and you just think, yeah, that's the place.
Sure. And Menifee, California.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of those names.
It really is. And you naturally sort of assume, okay, it's named after, I don't know, a founding father, maybe the first big farming family that settled the valley.
Right. That's the usual assumption.
Yeah.
But the deep dive we're doing today actually kicked off with a question the mayor of Menifee posed himself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was talking to some local school kids and asked basically, was the city named after one of those early pioneers?
Okay, so what's the answer?
Well, the answer, based on the material we've been digging through, is yes. Definitely. But maybe not the kind of pioneer you'd immediately picture.
How so?
It was named for a man called Luther Menifee Wilson.
Luther Menifee Wilson.
Okay.
Let's unpack this then. So our mission here, using these sources you've gathered, is to really get the story of this guy.
Right.
We want to follow his path, which apparently starts pretty far from California, track his search for gold, for fortune, and figure out the, well, frankly, surprising reason his name ended up attached to this valley.
A place now known mostly for, homes and farms.
Exactly. We want to get behind that name on the map, uncover the full story, the unexpected bits.
Okay, so Luther Menifee Wilson. He was born way back in 1842.
42. Okay.
In Mount Sterling, Kentucky.
Kentucky. All right. So definitely not a native Californian.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And by the time he was just 18, the records show him already, working for the railroad.
18. That's young to be out working on the railroad back then.
It is. And there's another interesting detail the sources mention. Later on, when he was in Riverside County, the local papers often called him Colonel Luther Wilson.
Colonel. Given his age in, say, the 1860s, does that suggest maybe Civil War service?
It certainly suggests it, yeah. A strong possibility he was a veteran.
So he makes his way west. When did he get to California?
Sometime before 1870. So still relatively early days for the state, especially Southern California.
And what did he do when he first got here?
He found work as a miner, initially a bit north in Kern County.
Okay. Typical gold rush path, sort of.
Kind of. And then in 1872, he makes a really potentially valuable connection. He marries Mary Jane Clark.
Mary Jane Clark. All right.
And her father was a big deal in transportation out of San Bernardino. We're talking stagecoach lines.
Wow.
Express wagons built specifically to haul gold bullion.
No kidding.
Even those iconic 20-mule team ore wagons you hear about. Imagine the network and the knowledge that opens up for Wilson.
Yeah, incredible connections. If you're in the mining game, you can sort of see him learning the ropes, maybe.
Absolutely honing his craft. By 1879, he pops up as a hotel keeper.
A hotel keeper?
Yeah, in a place called Ivanpah. Tiny little silver mining town way out in the Mojave Desert.
Ivanpah.
But it wasn't just about running the hotel. The sources are clear. He was also working the local mines there, really improving his skills as a prospector.
Right, getting better at spotting the signs.
Exactly. And it's these prospecting ventures, this search, that eventually leads him towards the area we now call Menifee.
Ah, okay. How did that happen?
Well, in the early 1880s, these small gold mining districts were starting to form nearby. Places like Paris and Hemet had little booms.
Right, I've heard of those.
So Wilson, who by this point had actually separated from his wife, Mary Jane, he was drawn to that general area by the prospecting buzz.
Following the gold trail.
Pretty much. And then 1883, that's the key year.
What happened?
He discovers it. A gold-bearing quartz ledge.
Big find.
That's the moment it all pivots. He found this ledge near what today is the intersection of Holland and Marietta Roads. And he files a claim, his claim for his mine.
And he calls it, let me guess.
He calls it the Menifee Mine, using his middle name.
The Menifee Mine. Wow, so that's it. That's where the name comes from.
That's literally it. That simple act, naming his claim Menifee, is what put the name on the map. Government survey maps started labeling the whole area the Menifee Mining District.
Just from his claim name?
Just from his claim name. And from there, the name just sort of stuck for the whole valley. All because of his mine.
That's amazing. One guy names his little gold claim, and boom, a whole valley gets its name. So what was this Menifee mine actually like? Was it substantial?
Well, the descriptions say the gold-bearing vein itself, the quartz, was about 3 feet wide.
Okay.
And they dug 4 shafts along this vein. One of them went down pretty deep for the time, 125 feet.
Whoa, 125 feet. That's serious digging. No messing around.
No, that's proper mining. And they had a pretty sophisticated setup, too. The main shaft, it was designed as a double compartment shaft.
Double compartment. What's that for?
It was efficient. Measured about 5 feet by 11 feet. It meant they could send 2 buckets, they called them kibbles back then, up and down at the same time.
Okay. So one coming up, one going down.
Exactly. Carrying men or maybe pumping out water. Much more efficient.
And they must have needed some power to run that, right? And process the ore.
Oh, yeah. They put up a steam-powered 5-stamp mill right there at the mine site.
A stamp mill. That's for crushing the rock.
Right. Crushing the quartz ore to get the gold out. This one, a 5-stamp mill, was capable of processing somewhere between 5 and 10 tons of ore every single day.
10 tons a day. That's a lot of rock.
It is. And here's a detail that really paints a picture of the time and place.
Yeah.
The sound. The constant thump, thump, thump of that stamp mill crushing rock. It could reportedly be heard from miles across the valley.
Wow. Imagine living near that constant noise.
Day in, day out. Must have been something.
So, okay. He finds the gold. He names the mine Menifee. He sets up this pretty impressive operation. Did it actually make him rich? Did it pay off?
For him, yes, at least initially.
Yeah.
He sold his claim, the Menifee mine, in 1884.
A year after finding it.
Yep. Sold it for $10,000.
$10,000 in 1884 money. That's a lot.
That was a very substantial sum back then. And here's a crucial point the sources emphasize. Wilson was one of the very few miners in that specific area who actually managed to turn a real profit from their claims.
Really? So most of the others didn't?
No, not really.
Right.
And this ties into the bigger story of mining in this part of California. It wasn't like the massive, sustained rushes up north.
Right.
Mining here started relatively late, and it honestly didn't last all that long. Most of the prospectors, the guys digging holes everywhere, they were just undercapitalized.
Didn't have enough money to really develop things.
Exactly. They had to borrow money, maybe for equipment or supplies, and then their mines would often sit idle or change hands constantly when the lenders called in the debts. So Wilson, selling for $10,000 cash. He was definitely in the winner's circle, which was rare there.
Okay, so he's a miner first and foremost, finds gold, makes a profit, gets his name on the valley. But the Menifee Valley ends up being known for farming, for agriculture. Did Wilson have anything to do with that side of things?
Surprisingly, yes. It seems like even though his main focus was pulling gold out of the ground, he also recognized the potential on the ground for farming.
Interesting pivot.
Yeah. In 1885, just a year after he sold the Menifee mine claim, he filed a different kind of claim. A claim for a dam site.
A dam site? Where?
Up on Strawberry Creek, near Idylwilds in the mountains. And the stated purpose was specifically to store water for irrigation down in the San Jacinto Valley, which includes the Menifee area.
Wow. A miner claiming water rights for farming. That shows some foresight, doesn't it?
It really does. He clearly saw more than just the rocks. There's even a quote attributed to him about this water claim.
Yeah.
He apparently said it would be better than money in the bank for his children.
Better than money in the bank? Shows he was thinking long-term, beyond just the quick gold strike.
Seems like it. And he didn't stop there with agriculture. In 1887, he and a cousin actually came back down from wherever they were and scouted the area specifically looking for good agricultural land.
For what purpose?
The idea was to bring several of their relatives out from Kentucky, from back home, to settle and farm the land.
So he was actively trying to bring farmers to the area.
It looks that way, yes.
Yeah.
Planning a sort of family settlement.
And yet, he couldn't quite give up the mining bug, could he?
Seems like he couldn't shake it. The lure was too strong. By 1893, right around the time Riverside County itself was officially formed,
Okay.
Wilson was back at it, working new mining claims with some partners.
Where were these ones?
These were south of where Scott and Leon roads are today. The mine was called the King Wilson Mine, or sometimes the Alice Mine.
King Wilson Mine. Got it. Is there anything special about that one?
Well, the geology was pretty striking, apparently. The gold-bearing ledge, the vein they were following, it actually cropped right out of the surface in the middle of a barley field.
You're kidding. A gold vein sticking out of a barley field.
That's what the sources say. You could apparently trace it for over half a mile, just walking across the field.
The irony is just...
Wow. So you've got gold and agriculture literally side by side. Did this King Wilson venture work out any better?
Sadly, no. Like so many other mines in that district, it seems this one also played out after just a few years. the equipment from the King Wilson mine. It ended up getting sold off and shipped down to a mining company in Mexico.
Another one bites the dust.
Okay.
So despite these later attempts not panning out, what was his reputation like in the area by then?
It seems his reputation was actually pretty solid. By 1895, there were still plenty of hopeful prospectors poking around the hills there.
Sure.
And Wilson was generally seen as the local expert, the go-to guy for advice on mines.
The veteran who knew the territory.
Exactly. The sources use this great phrase, something like, when Wilson said dig, it was pretty safe to figure on there being pay dirt near.
High praise in that world.
Oh, hi.
He clearly knew his stuff.
He did. He had the experience.
Okay, so let's recap. We have Luther Menifee Wilson, comes from Kentucky, works the railroad, maybe fights in the war, comes to California, marries into transportation, becomes a prospector, finds gold, names the Menifee mine, sells it for a good profit.
Right. Then pivots to thinking about water for farming, tries to bring relatives out.
Goes back to mining, finds another vein in a barley field, but that one fizzles out.
Ends up as a respected local mining expert.
Yeah.
So what's the final chapter? How did his story end?
Well, this is where the story takes a really quite poignant turn, and maybe the ultimate irony of it all.
Okay.
Luther Menifee Wilson died in 1899.
All right.
And despite that early success with the Menifee mine, despite his expertise, he died destitute, broke, with outstanding debts.
Wow. Destitute. After selling that first claim for so much.
Apparently so. The fortunes didn't last, or maybe later ventures drained his funds. It's a stark reminder of how precarious things could be.
He really is rough. Where? What happened then?
He was buried in the Olivewood Memorial Cemetery in Riverside.
Okay.
In an unmarked grave.
An unmarked grave for the man whose name is on the whole valley. The guy who literally named the place.
That's the story the sources tell. An unmarked grave. It's stark, like you said.
It really underscores that boom and bust cycle you mentioned, doesn't it? Especially for mining.
Absolutely. And it sets up that final, biggest irony we touched on earlier.
It does.
The Menifee Valley. Named for its first significant gold miner, Luther Menifee Wilson.
Right.
But ultimately, it wasn't miners who built the community. It was settled, developed, and really defined by grain farmers.
People looking for land, not just gold.
Exactly. People who came seeking land to cultivate, a place to raise their families, a completely different vision, really, than Wilson's main focus, even though, yes, he did see that agricultural potential later on.
Okay, let's sit back and unpack this a bit. What does this whole story of Luther Menifee Wilson tell us about that California gold rush era? Especially thinking beyond the big famous stories like Sutter's Mill we all learn about.
Well, I think it shows us it wasn't just one big single event, right? The gold rush was also made up of countless smaller, more localized rushes.
Like the ones in Paris and Hemet that drew him there.
Exactly. And these were often much shorter-lived, much less consistently profitable than the northern ones. It highlights just how incredibly high risk the whole endeavor was.
Yeah.
Even finding something significant, like Wilson did with the Menifee mine, was absolutely no guarantee of lasting wealth or security.
Which leads to that really interesting point you raised. How often does this happen? Places get named after figures whose own lives end up looking, well, completely different from the place's eventual identity or prosperity.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it?
It really is. Menifee today, this growing city, very family-oriented, rooted in agriculture and now development. It's named after a prospector who died broke and lies in an unmarked grave.
It completely flips that initial assumption we talked about, doesn't it? The founding father idea.
Totally. So what's the bigger takeaway here? What does this all mean when we think about names and places?
I think it's a really powerful illustration of maybe the difference between extracting finite resources, like gold, and cultivating renewable ones, like crops.
Extracting versus cultivating. Yeah.
And it shows those multiple dreams people were chasing when they headed west. It wasn't just about gold fever for everyone. For many, it was about finding stable land, putting down roots through farming.
Two different kinds of wealth, maybe.
Perhaps. And fundamentally, it's just a great reminder that the names on our maps, the labels we see every day, often hide these really complex, sometimes contradictory human stories. It kind of urges us, look past the simple name, try to understand the full, often messy history of both the person and the place.
It really does. This whole deep dive, it's shown such a surprising journey just behind one name, a place named for a gold miner, but ultimately built by farmers, and linked to a man whose personal story ended, well, with nothing.
Yeah. And maybe it leaves us and leaves you listening with this thought to kind of chew on.
Okay.
Luther Menifee Wilson, he looked for his fortune in the ground, right? Trying to pull wealth out of those veins of quartz.
Right.
But the lasting value of that land, the value that actually built and sustained a community, that gave the valley its enduring character, that was found on the surface through farming, through cultivation.
Right.
So what does that difference tell us? The difference between extracting wealth and cultivating it. What does that say about maybe our relationship with the land itself? And how does a place's original intention, the reason it got its name, stack up against the identity it eventually grows into?